Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NacheSnow.com. Welcome. Oh my goodness. So you guys, this week I have on Latasha Thomas. Discover her online, and we're just going to talk about our own personal journeys. Neither one of us are financial planners. Latasha considers herself a financial educator, and she shares her journey in order to help others. And she has also helped people stay accountable and set goals. And so, huge disclaimer, like, definitely as we talk about all the things, and if you decide to make any sweeping financial decisions, talk to a certified financial planner to make sure that what you're doing makes sense for you. In this episode, we're just hoping that we give you the foundation, the building blocks to start thinking about what type of financial decisions might be right for you. And hopefully, you can learn by our personal experiences, and that will help you build wealth, understand your money, and then also add towards generational wealth for your family. And so I love this episode because you guys know I love money. I think people think that money is a dirty word, but it's because we've been taught that it's a dirty word, and sometimes by the media and things we see, and the people that have a lot of money, sometimes the ones that are often portrayed in the media aren't doing great things. But money is not good or evil, and it helps you accomplish your dreams. It helps you help others. It helps just in so many different areas. And so I just think it's a conversation that we should always be having. And sometimes we as women in general, and sometimes we as people of color, don't talk about it as much as we need to. And for me, as a woman and as a woman of color, I just really think we should be comfortable with having these conversations around money. So, this episode, we are chatting about knowing your numbers. We chat a little bit about money and relationships. We talk about friends and family when it comes to money, why it's important to consume financial content, the dual income myth. I mean, emergency funds, like, you name it. As a woman, just things that you should be thinking about in order to set yourself up for the future. So, if you are really ready to make some sweeping changes, if you've already made some sweeping changes in your financial journey and you're looking for other things that you can do, I think this episode provides a little bit of something for everyone to get you thinking and get you hungry enough to go out and get more knowledge and maybe talk to certified planners in order to do what you need to do. If you're ready and willing, hang with us. A few housekeeping things. This is the week of Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, I do. So I'm like super excited. I'm about to go to Chicago, whoop whoop, and see my family, which I didn't get to see last year. So I'm really, really excited. So this is the last interview for this year because we only have one more week left. I'm trying to debate if I should do a solo episode or not for next week. So let me know if you have any topics you would love for me to cover. You can email me at hello@nachesnow.com, or you can go over to Instagram at nachesnow and just DM me and just say, hey, Nache, I would love you to cover X. And it can really be about anything. So if I get some things, then I may do one more episode this year. If not, no worries. I recently did another interview with someone who will start us off at the top of the year, and you guys are going to love her. So, no worries. The season is not over, my friends. Also, if you love this episode and if you love the podcast, sharing is caring, my friends. Please share away. And thank you to everyone who's done that already. I think I mentioned this on the last episode that my numbers continue to grow. And even after the second episode this season, they grew even more. So you guys are sharing it. And yeah, it's a good feeling because these women that I have on here are really amazing and they're sharing their story and being vulnerable. And they are here for you to make sure you accomplish your goals. And so the more people that hear their stories, the more that we can have impact. So it just really warms my heart. But anywho, if you love the podcast and you're an Apple head, please go over to Apple Podcasts and rate me 5 stars and leave a review if you feel so inclined. If you're on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. Wherever you're listening, subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Okay. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my newsletter, nachesnow.com/newsletter. You can choose between business or productivity. All right. Let's get into this episode. I'm telling you guys, you are going to love it. It's just, this is my first time meeting her, and I felt like it was just chatting with like an old friend about money. Like when you get on the phone and you just start talking about what you should do. That's what this conversation feels like. And I hope it feels like you're just like sitting at a coffee shop overhearing two friends talk about money. Yeah, let's get into it. Here we go. Hello, Latasha, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. I'm so excited to have you on. You are my maybe last episode of the year, unless I decide to do a solo one, which I haven't decided, but you will at least be the last guest of the year. So no pressure.
Good timing.
No pressure. But I'm really excited to have you on. People who've been listening to this podcast a while know that I'm a big believer in knowing your finances, prepping for the future, generational wealth, and all of that good stuff. So when I stumbled upon your Instagram account, and I've been following you for a while, I'm like, I like what she's doing. But before we get into some of the tips and tricks that I would love for you to pass on to the listeners, can you just tell them a little bit about you and then why you started to go on this debt pay, I guess, journey, or let me know what you call it. But yeah, let us know a little bit about you and how you got started with everything.
My name is Latasha Thomas. I would consider myself as a financial educator. I've been sharing my story. I call it a wealth building journey because there are definitely many facets to financial tips and not just debt payoffs, things like that. So I started sharing my story about a year and a half ago publicly. I started off actually with an accountability group that I started. One of my friends hosts a vision board party every year. And this was the one right before COVID hit. And so it was 4 of us. And I said, hey, I'd like to have a meetup once a month just to keep us on track with money goals. And they all thought it was really cool. And we did it for a year. And I'd actually tried this a few years back. And I consider myself a practical person. So there's always these journeys I feel like I'm embarking on. A few years back, the health thing was a really big thing to me, still big in my life, but I was like really focused on health and fitness and wellness. The first time I tried to get a bunch of emails for women interested in doing a monthly group, I didn't get any responses really. I told 2 other friends about it and they were like, yeah, we'd be interested. Sent it out to about 15 women saying, hey, I'd like to meet up once a month and we could talk about different things, like have different themes related to finances. And I got no responses, which leads me to believe that I think money is a taboo topic, at least in our culture. And so people really sometimes are raised not to talk about it. And so I want to change that, which is why I started sharing my journey mostly through Instagram.
I love the idea of having an accountability coach or even just an accountability partner because, I mean, you hear that for even things like weight loss, right? Anytime you're trying to do or make a significant change, it's always good to have that person there that's like, have you done this? What have you done this week? Did you know?
Yes. Yes.
But okay, no. So tell us about how you start, like when you started a year and a half ago, what were some of your initial financial goals, and how did you begin to tackle them and make sure that you were following through?
Yeah, I guess I'll start before that. So there wasn't like one event that was I'm going to start on this financial journey. So I consider myself a practical person, and as I stated earlier, I sometimes get inspired and I have these journeys, whether it's fitness or money. And I say journey because I don't want it to be a phase. So years back, I had said to myself, it would be really cool to not have debt if I start a family, like having my student loan paid off by the time I had kids, which I don't right now, would be awesome. So I've always had this thing about myself where I feel like I do an evaluation of my life and I feel like I need to improve areas, then I do that. And so kind of slowly crept up, and we had the federal shutdown back in, it was 2018, I believe, going into 2019, this time 3 years ago. So that was one event that kind of, for me, rocked me a little bit because we were shut down for 5 weeks. And at that time, we didn't know it was going to be 5 weeks. And I had just paid for a roof on my house, and we didn't know the government was going to shut down. So I had spent thousands of dollars on that. And of course, it was done. And I'm like, oh my God. So we missed, I think, 2 pay periods and finally were called back to work. We ended up getting back pay, but we did not know at the time. And I actually, for a very, 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 very short time, became an Uber driver. It's kind of a joke now, but I was like, I don't know where I'm going to get money from. I don't know how long this is going to last. So I need to do what I got to do. And I did not have what I have now, and I'll get to it a little bit later, the emergency fund. I didn't have enough, I felt, to sustain me, like if this were to go on for months, which thankfully it didn't. But yeah, so there was that. And I also, like I mentioned, I had the vision board party that my friend hosted. So those kind of things. But I think one of the big things that kind of got me started was, at the time I was in a serious relationship. And very, very serious. We were engaged, but at that time we were not, but we were, of course, talking about marriage. And so, at least for me, and I know people have different philosophies, I was like, money is a huge thing in marriage and relationships. I wanted to make sure that I was coming into, at that time, what I thought was going to be a marriage, making sure that I was working on myself in areas that I felt I needed to improve on. The debt thing came up. And so in January of 2020, when we were at the vision board party, my first goal was to pay off the remainder of my student loan. At the time, my federal student loan, which was $8,000. And then COVID hit, and of course that rocked, and is still rocking everybody's world. And I felt like I could pay off my next loan, which was my private loan balance, which was $16,500. And then I only had about $300 in credit card debt. And then I had my retirement loan that I had taken out when I purchased my home almost 7 years ago. So that was all the debt I had at the time. And I just got started with the first loan, just saying to myself, it would be great not to have this coming in to a potential marriage at the time and all of that. So that's how I got started. And then I just started in June of that year, sharing it on Instagram, and it picked up. So I had people DMing me and asking me how I was doing it.
I have some, specific questions about tips we can give people who are trying to figure out how to plan getting down like a student loan or getting down a credit card payment. But I want to just back up just for a second. And so people who listen to the podcast, I did an episode last year just talking about getting divorced. So you guys know I've been married before. So I'm just going to throw out just a few little things, It's just my philosophy. But one thing I did before getting married is my then fiance and we exchanged credit reports. So we both knew what we were getting into, if there was any debt. We also talked openly about our financial situation. So we were going into the marriage knowing what we were bringing. And then I read, and you guys have heard me probably say this before, Michelle Singletary, Susie Orman, and some other books. And then we had talked about how we wanted to do our savings and our money market accounts and our checking accounts. Like, do we do joint or not joint? What works for us? We knew we weren't going to have kids, but we had that discussion before we said I do. So I just wanted to,
Yes.
one, just throw that out there. And also to let people know that are married, like, that conversation shouldn't stop there. So once you're
Mm-hmm.
married, you should
Mm-hmm.
still know your numbers. You should still be having open conversations. And if you're not, why not? I think you need to ask yourself, why not? And you should always be able to sustain yourself, because, of course, you want that marriage to last forever, but nothing is promised. Anything can happen. Like, you could become a widow, people grow apart, and if you don't have a good idea of your financial situation and haven't saved up for a rainy day, you could find yourself in a tough spot.
Yeah, and women tend, I feel like, we're the ones traditionally that come out worse if it is a divorce, or even if it's just a relationship that didn't work out, depending on what the status of the relationship was. A lot of us have been taught, not all of us, that men are better at finances, which isn't always true. And it's just good. And that's why I do what I do. Part of it is because, just in general, finances is not something that people are talking about. Like you just mentioned with your previous marriage, it's something that's very pertinent to the success of relationships. Sometimes it's one of the biggest reasons that people, when their marriages can end up not working out, because of that. People are so different. They have philosophies around money, how we were raised, and two people are the same. So like you said, you should continue to talk about that in your relationship or marriage, because money is a tool and it drives almost everything. So you may have two people, one's more of a spender, one's more of a saver. And so figuring out where you guys can come in the middle to where both people aren't feeling stifled, that's a balancing act. So it's very pertinent to the success of relationships. But you don't have to be in a relationship to think that money is important. You still have to take care of yourself, even if you're a single person. And even though I mentioned my previous relationship, that kind of was one of the reasons why I started with the whole debt payoff thing. It just got me started, but that's not why I'm doing it, now. It's something that I see as important and one of my values now. And I've just had so much fun learning about the different aspects of money and wealth in general.
And that made me think of another question. Like, even before we get into how you structured your payoffs, there are a lot of folks out there that really don't have a good idea of everything they owe as far as
Yes.
debt. And so, do you have any advice for folks on really how to organize, like, all the things, so then they even know, like, how much they're even worth?
Yes. So thankfully now we have the internet. So most of the time you can go in and log into an account, whether it's a credit card account, student loan account, to see exactly what you owe, the interest rates, the monthly payment deadlines, all of that kind of thing. So I knew to the cent how much I had paid off. So I believe, and hopefully this is right, because I really should know this number. I believe I paid $32,511 and $511.92. So over 32K. And that was all four of the debt categories that I owed. So it's important to know that, because there are a lot of people, like you said, who can't even tell you. They may be able to give you a ballpark range of how much debt. Student loans are a perfect example. And it's very important. So I would say that's the first step, is getting everything lined up and organized, and also finding out what kind of, I don't know if learner is the right word, or person you are. So I'm a visual learner. So what I did to help organize my debt payoff was I did use Instagram a lot, because I knew when I paid something off, or I was giving tips, or just talking about my progress, people would see it and they would like it and they would engage with the post. So that kept me motivated. But I also used what I call a visual tracking system called the Goal Box. And it's something that I created. I sold some last year, because a lot of people saw my debt progress and they were like, we want to get in on this. So basically what it is, it's a visual tracking system, and I am a fan of Post-it notes. I have Post-it notes everywhere in my house, like lists on my phone, physical lists on paper. And so for me, that works. So what I did is I had in 2020, it was the debt payoff. That was my overall annual goal. And I broke down my goals by month. So what the first month may be something like read a book related to personal finance.
Mm.
The second month could be something like don't go out to eat for the entire 30 days or whatever. I do not, by the way, do good with those challenges. I know myself now. But things like that. So whatever, it doesn't have to be something like really big, but something that continues to move you towards that goal. And so you just get in the habit of setting these small goals. You can break it down by the month, you can break it down by the week. It's up to you. But that really helped. And I would keep it in my family room. It was up all year. I just took it down from this year so that when I walk into my house every day, the goals are right there. And people would come in my house and they would see it's the first thing. But it really helped. So just something that keeps you motivated. Some people like spreadsheets. That doesn't work for me, but that works for some other people. So you just have to find out what works for you.
You're right. Everybody has a different system, and you have to read and just kind of talk to people and figure out like what resonates with you. And you know yourself. So for me, for example, I had an Excel sheet. And I'm not even like an Excel sheet person, wizard. I'm talking folks like this is like basics of the Excel and being able to highlight all the columns and then have them add up to a sum, right? It was so basic.
Yes.
But what I did is I got my free credit reports from, I think it's annualcreditreport.com, right? And so that kind of gave me a picture of at least what Equifax thought about me. Then I looked at all my personal accounts. I looked at credit card accounts. I looked at student loans. I looked at just all the things that I was paying, and I just put everything into that Excel sheet. And then from there, just the way my brain worked, I was just like, okay, I'm going to start with this one, and then I'm going to start paying off this. And then I would change the numbers in the sheet. And so to me, like seeing those numbers change, seeing things go to zero helped keep me motivated.
Yeah, like you said, it's whatever works for you. I would say that after you figure out, you line up your debts and know exactly to the cent how much you owe, the next thing would be to figure out a debt payoff method.
Yes.
So I know you've probably heard about the debt snowball versus the debt avalanche. And there's a third one I'll touch on, the debt tsunami. I'm not sure if you know about that, but I used mostly the debt snowball. And so what the debt snowball is that is when you line up all of your debts and you take the smallest balance and you pay that off first. Say it's the $300 minimum, credit card that I told you I had the balance. So I would attack that one first. And say I paid it the $300 just free and clear. I would then apply that $300 to my next biggest payment, which at the time was the $8,000 federal student loan. So it's a snowball effect. You just build on. So whatever you were paying on the previous debt that was smallest, you keep applying that. And then you just keep going up and up and up until the debt is paid off. The next one is, and the first one, the debt snowball, before I move on to the second one, that's more of it works, I think, psychologically because some people need those small wins. So they just need to see quick progress because that helps keep them motivated. The second one is the debt avalanche. And what that is, you pay off the balance that has the highest interest rate first. And mathematically speaking, that's better in, certain aspects because interest will kill you. You guys know, like that's the fee. That is the cost of doing business and taking out debt, as they're going to make money. And so if you look at the loan or the debt over an amount of time, you'll see how much interest you're paying. So if you want to attack the interest and not have to pay out as much over time, then you would use the debt avalanche. And again, that's mathematically, it works out to be better. You end up paying out less over a total. The third one, the debt tsunami, what I've heard about that is you pay the debt off that has the biggest emotional impact. So say you owe, it could be a family member or a friend, which I have some philosophies about borrowing money from family or friends. I think you should just give it because owing money can cause rift in relationships. And
Yes.
so if you feel like, say you borrowed $5,000 from your cousin and you said you're going to pay them back, and now it's 2 years and you're on this debt journey now, and that one's been putting a burden on your relationship, then they would say to pay that one off first, because that's giving you the most emotional turmoil, which I thought was really interesting. I had never heard about that when I just heard about the two before that one.
I like that, and I will double down on giving money to family and friends. I do not do it unless number one, it has to be the right circumstance, because there is so many emotions attached to that. And I have to, whatever they're using it for, I need to be okay with, because it is the money I'm giving. Because some people are like, you should just give it. It's your family. It's your friend. No, it's hard-earned money that you've earned. And so you have the right to know and understand where it's going. And then I agree with you too. Even if there is an agreement that it's going to be paid back, mentally, I need to be in a place where I'm like, if I don't get back this $5,000, I am one with it. I have written it off in my brain. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to make sure that you will be okay with it and not look at them a certain way. If you know 3 years from now, if you haven't been given a dime and you're going to be upset, it's worth having them angry at you for a moment for not giving it than holding on to that anger or disappointment for years. But I mean, everybody's different. Everybody has their own philosophy, but I agree with you on that. So no, I love that you went through the three ways to tackle it. Cause I think I did the snowball effect. And I also had this philosophy, and let me know if you were in this situation too. If I ever got large sums of money, like for example, when I sold my first condo, I just immediately put that onto my student loans. Like I was like, ooh, nice. Ooh, that looks good. I pretended like I didn't even have it, and then just put all of the money, for the most part, onto that loan in order to help me pay it off. So what are your thoughts on that? Because sometimes people are like, no, you should just keep the money if you get awards or sell a house and just put it in the savings account. And I'm like, nah, maybe you could put a few dollars in the savings account. But my philosophy is like, I just wanted that debt gone.
Yeah, so well, just to preface this, I am not a financial planner, so I have to say that.
Yeah.
But so I know some people would be like, well, you should do this and this and this. But if you already decided, I think that people, and I've learned this in years of therapy, but I think that people should live their life based on their values. So one of my values is security. And that can mean different things. So your example of you got this sum of money and you're like, I just want to be done with this. So it sounded like at the time you were really focused on, I want to get rid of this debt because of whatever reason. Personal finance, people always say personal finance is personal. So it's not a one size fits all. I don't believe for everyone. You might hear from somebody else that if you got this sum of money, maybe you should pay this percentage towards your debt, and then another maybe you should put into like savings or a sinking fund or invest some of it. But I think it really depends. If you're like, I really want to get rid of this debt by this certain date or deadline, I would say to go ahead and do it. But I think you also have to evaluate what else is going on in your life, because you may need to split the money in a different way.
I wanted to get into just some tips also for like, okay, you have, I'm just throwing out some numbers, like a $10,000 student loan. And so you'll have, everybody's situation is different. Some people will be like, Latasha, like I know I have this loan. I really want to pay it off, but I'm living check to check. Like, how do I do this? How do I plan it? Then you'll have other people who make good money, but maybe they're buying bags, shoes, technology, spending it on the things they love versus paying down their debt. So how did you go about deciding how to pay off like those first few loans? And do you have any advice for people who could be in those two different camps?
Yeah. And again, I will just say what worked for me. So as I mentioned, so I really formally embarked on this debt payoff journey in January 2020. So I've always paid the minimum on, I'll say, on student loans. When it came to credit cards, because I'm not a big credit card user, sometimes I would throw $300 at it or whatever. Sometimes they say, oh, it's a $27 a month minimum payment. So what I did, like I said, those monthly goals, I did try doing a line by line budget the first few months. And that did not work for me. And I know some people in the finance community are going to be like, oh my God, but this is what worked for me. So I looked at roughly what my expenses were going to be. So like my mortgage, my water, electricity, gas, all that kind of stuff. And I looked at what I had left over. And of course, this was just like major have to pay expenses. And so what I did was basically, if it wasn't going to bills and a little bit of savings, all of it was going to debt payoff. I did have in 2020, I had a 4-month temporary promotion, which I talked about a little bit on my blog. So my pay went up for those 4 months. Again, use that calculated like I told you at the beginning with just expenses, savings, everything else goes to debt. Any bonuses I got, that also went to debt. So I would say, and living paycheck to paycheck is very American, I will say. A lot of us are doing it. And a lot of us are doing it. People who, to some people, it's, oh my God, you're making how much? Because the trap is the more you make, a lot of times people, they make their expenses go up. So they're spending more because they're like, oh, I'm making this. So it really comes down to discipline. And I won't say it doesn't matter how much you make, because for some folks, I believe it's an income issue and you need to think about that. But what I will say is, for those who may have an income issue, they're like, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. One of the books that changed my life, and this was actually after I paid off all of my non-mortgage debt, but I would read it as soon as you can. I've bought it for people because it was just one of those things. And it's called We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers. And it's such a good book. And I was listening to some other financial influencers, and they were saying things like, if you look at how personal finance has been taught to women over the years, it's usually from a place of you need to do more with less. Maybe the whole couponing thing, or don't spend as much. And she just comes from this approach that, like, you're empowered to make money. There's literally this part in the book where she talks about write down 25 ways, and it could be big or small, that you think you can make extra income. And so it's just so empowering, because her goal, I think, with her company is to help women with their businesses, but realize that they can become millionaires. And of course, that's an arbitrary number, but it shows you that there's nothing wrong with wanting more money. Money's a tool, and there's always somebody in your life, whether it's you or somebody attached to you, that may need it. And so I would say that I did a lot of reading and consuming financial content while I was on my journey, especially for debt payoff. I was watching YouTube every single day, multiple times a day, listening to different podcast episodes just to keep me in the frame of mind, listening to IG Lives. And like I said before, talking to people that were in my accountability groups, because you really need to make sure that you get around people who are like-minded, or who are curious at least about the whole wealth journey, and whether it's debt payoff or investing or things like that, because that'll keep you focused. And if you don't have people who are in your life physically, like people that I have a lot of online mentors that like I said, I will go on their IG Lives, and they really, especially during COVID, because we were in lockdown and it's what else is there to do? Consume content on the internet. So I found a lot of people who were just giving that support and those tips via, social media. So I would say that.
No, I like that. I mean, a couple of things I wrote down as you were talking that you made me think about is, one, folks, I'm telling you guys, it doesn't matter if you make 30,000 or 150,000. You can get out of debt, and you hear the stories, and I know people who were making 30, 40,000 and now they're debt free, where someone who could be making 150,000 is living paycheck to paycheck. So I really do think it's a mindset thing. It's having a plan,
Mm-hmm.
sticking with that plan. So regardless of your situation, I think if you believe in yourself and you get creative, you can make it happen. And I also wanted to mention too, I love, how you said that you wrote down what your expenses are, because that's another thing that people don't realize is how much money is going to Netflix, Disney Plus,
Mm-hmm.
other subscriptions, Audible, your utility bills, your mortgage, your
Yes.
rent, because it all comes out of like your accounts in different times. And you might be paying for something you're not even using. And that's one of the things that I did
Mm-hmm.
too, is I'm like, I made a list. I think I wrote it out first and then put it into an Excel sheet. But of a list, like one of the tabs was all the different things I was paying. And I ended up calling to get I think it was like my phone bill down at that time. I reduced my cable bill at that time because I was like, even though I'm a TV head, I'm trying to get this money. Like, I'm just going to have to sacrifice it for now, any little bit. I remember there was a time where I was working 2, 3 jobs. I had a main job, but then I would have like side hustles on nights and
Mm-hmm.
weekends. And for some people, maybe they would think, oh my goodness, but you have no life and you're not able to do cool and fun things. But I'm like, I was still able to have fun. And
Mm-hmm.
because of the sacrifices I made early on, I've been debt free for almost a decade, and I would do it again
Yeah.
in a heartbeat. Like I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
lose some of those hours on nights and weekend than still be feeling the weight of that debt on
Yes.
me, you know?
Yes, I think it's like I said earlier, going back to values and then finding out what I know it sounds so cliche, but what's your why? I'm always thinking futuristically. If I have kids, if I get married, I'm not going to have student loans going into this. Like I'm not going to have I just my philosophy and my mindset has changed. And when you're especially as Black women, like when you're free from debt because of some of the history of Blacks in this country, it's just another layer like of freedom because Americans in general are bogged down with debt. But it's another form of slavery, I feel like. And when you are released from that, you're able to do so much more with your money. You can
Mm-hmm.
give more, you can put more money towards hobbies. I've seen some financial influencers, one that I was following starting COVID, she just got up and moved to Spain because her money is like right now. And like you were saying, some people are like, oh, you have to sacrifice X, Y, and Z. If you're looking at it, and I'm not saying, because I know some people have an extreme view on this, but I did this in 11 months and 11 days to be exact.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to pay off your debt that quickly, by no means. But that was 1 year of my life that I was
Mm-hmm.
able to tackle something that I am no longer dealing with. And I'm able to do more with my money, like investing more, putting more towards my mortgage. A week ago or about 2 weeks ago, I, for the first time, maxed out my retirement contributions for my TSP, which is similar to a 401k. Just things that I didn't think I could do at the time because I had debt.
Yes.
I had that non-mortgage debt. So
That,
it's
that
it's
weight.
it
Yeah.
builds confidence. Yes. So when you pay off that whatever the amount is and doing it yourself, it's just so freeing. So yeah.
And let's get into, so folks out there, as far as like coming up with a plan, we've delved into a few different things. And I do think once you decide to do that, you need to absorb content like crazy. So I'll put some books in there. I'll put the one that you mentioned from Rachel in there. And if you have any others, if you shoot them over an email, I'll make sure those are in the show notes too, just to get you started. But
Mhm.
let's talk about some other things that people should be doing, because I love what you said about maxing out on your retirement. I can think of one thing that I did is once I was debt free. So, for example, I paid off my car and I was like, yeah. And I probably haven't gotten a new car yet because I haven't had a car payment in so long, like almost 10
Yes.
years. I'm just like, I don't even know. I don't even know what a car payment feels like. And even if I could pay a car in full or put a good chunk down, I'm like, ooh. But anywho, when I initially paid off the loan for my current car, one thing that I did is I kept pretending as if I was paying for the car, but I put all of that money in a money market
Mm-hmm.
account in order to build my savings up. So then I
Mm-hmm.
could make sure I had 3 months of savings and 6 months of savings, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So I love to get your thoughts on just kind of things people should think about as they're on their financial journey, like doing stuff like that or maxing out on their retirement. Anything that comes to mind that'll be beneficial for folks.
Yeah, and I know, so for those of us who have been like, ooh, this money journey, financial journey, investing is always the sexy thing. It's always like, and it's a part of your wealth journey. But a lot of people want to jump to that. So the things that I'm about to recommend, I would say are building blocks, a part of making you better with money. And I think they give a good foundation. So we already touched on it. So the emergency fund is big. I just mentioned
Yes.
earlier that government shutdown, and we've seen this back and forth over the last few years. And you really should have, I would say this, the rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months. I have 6 months right now. And so what I did is I looked at my expenses again, because the expenses are different for everyone. Your mortgage or your rent, gas, electricity, all of those things. And I did a bare bones. So what that was is that is if something happens, I am able to take care of the necessities. Not going to Target, spending money because I love Target. So some people, when they do the emergency fund, they want to have that cushion so that if something does happen, they are still able to live life. And I have more money than just bare bones now, but when I was focusing on it, because I am not traditionally a saver, that is what I did. So what you do is you basically just add up your monthly expenses. And then if you're doing 3 or 6 months or 9 months or a year, you just multiply it by those amount of months. And that is how you get your emergency fund. And you also have to determine, what does an emergency mean for you? We like to
Mm-hmm.
think these are things that are unforeseen, things that we can't control. A pandemic, hint, hint. Something happens with your health, something happens. I know some people that have emergency funds after they have one for themselves, they set ones up for their family so that if family, falls on hard times, they're able to pull from that family emergency fund and give to them. And it's not a hardship for them because they've already had those building blocks set in place. So I would say the emergency fund. And I really do this as soon as possible. I was not in the right mind frame in my early 20s. It was like save a little bit here, but I really felt that my job was stable enough and it was just hard for me to get in that habit. And I know when you're in your 20s, you're starting to make the money, you want to spend it, some of us. And if you have the discipline and you have the foresight early on, I would say to do that as soon as possible. Because then again, that also keeps you, because a lot of us go into debt because it's, oh, well, this, my water heater, broke, or this happened or whatever. And that'll keep you from having to go into that credit card or pull out more debt, which obviously will add to the issues. So I would say the emergency fund. The second thing is, and I mentioned this earlier too, is savings. And more specifically, I would say sinking funds. So what sinking funds are, they're a little different than an emergency fund where you have a goal. Like say, and it's not even a goal, it's something that is coming up and it allows you to plan. So for example, Christmas, it's at the same time every year. So what some people do, and birthdays, the same thing, is whenever, it could be January, middle of the year, whatever, they start setting aside money every month. It could be the same amount if they want to say, okay, I'm going to set $100 every month. So by the time month 12, December comes around, I'll have $1,200 to use for Christmas. You can do the same amount, you can change, whatever. But a sinking fund basically is that, I would say, a designated savings account for something specific. People also use these for vacations, which is another thing that people sometimes go into debt for. They want to pull out the credit card. But if you want to go to the Caribbean 8 months from now, you can say, okay, and say you want to book it 6 months from now, so 2 months before you actually leave. You just take that 6 months and you use that as a number to calculate how much you're going to need to contribute monthly for that sinking fund. And so I think that helped me because I have a few sinking funds. I have one for like home renovations. I have one for gifts. I have some other ones. And like I said earlier, I'm not traditionally, I'm not a saver. So I need a goal. That's how I operate. And I'm very project based. So I'm like, okay, the goal is I want to go to Jamaica this date. So I need to save X amount of money by this date. And so it gives me a reason to save. And a lot of times we were told when we were younger, you need to save. Oh, wait, well, what am I saving for? I needed that because I'm like, well, if I just have $10,000 sitting here in the bank, like that's temptation for me because it's like, well, and I'll spend it. I will say that. And I say, if you have an issue with saving, don't keep your savings account at the same bank or place that you keep your checking account or spending account. So I have mine are separate and I use a few different banks. And I will say that what helped me, and this was interesting, this was a boss earlier on in my career that told me this. A lot of banks, what they'll do is if you're using it for a savings account, they will say you can't pull the money out for 72 hours. So what I would do, the reason why I had issues and earlier on with saving is I kept that savings account with my checking account at the same bank. And I would just go into the savings if I would like overdraft my checking and be like, oh, well, I still have the money. I just can pull it from here. So when you have a 72 or 48-hour hold on, you're like, okay, well, I know I can't get it for 3 days or 2 days. Do I really need it? That is how I was able to sustain my savings because I just felt like I didn't have the discipline. So that works for me. And I think that those can be a few tips for folks who maybe have an issue with saving or just trying to clarify, well, what exactly am I saving for? I need to have a goal, and sinking funds can do that for you. So yes.
Yeah, I love that goal. And I would say with the emergency fund too, because for some folks who are just like, oh my God, I don't know. It is taking your monthly expenses, you could times it by 3 and then use that number to get started. Because sometimes I think people overthink situations and be like, well, how much should I really save for 3 months? What does 3 months look like, right? Like, folks, do your little thing, Excel sheet on paper, figure out what you need to survive every month, times it times 3, and make that your first goal. Don't make it complicated at all. And I love that idea of the sinking fund. And this is another thing where, like you were saying earlier, every person is a little different and you really have to figure out what works for you. Because for me, I just lump everything in a money market all together. And I'm at the point now, though, that I'm really good. I don't touch it. If I touch it, it's because I'm like, okay, well, I'm going on this big trip now. And this is something that I want to do. So now I feel okay taking it out because that is my kind of sinking emergency everything fund, but I have enough net in there because I've been building on it that I know when to take from it, right? But sometimes though, folks, you do have to trick yourself. So you just have to know like that system that works for you. And I think for me, like over the years, that kind of works for me. And I think even when we talked a little bit ago offline, I had told you too, I'm one of those people also that I ended up getting a Chase Sapphire card to earn points because I love to travel. Well, at least I did before COVID. And I pay for everything, almost everything except for a couple of bills using my credit card. But I also pay it off every single month. There's not a month that goes by. But if you know that you're not that type of person and you try to do something like that, my friends, you will get into a ridiculous amount of debt. So another thing I wanted to talk to you about is some of that comes from, of course, knowing who you are, but some of that is mindset too, right? And I think you've talked about like human behavior and things like that. So can you kind of talk a little bit more on that topic? Because sometimes people are like, oh, I've heard that before, but I'm like, no. You need to understand everything comes down to willpower. Everything comes
Hmm.
down to knowing who you are. Everything comes down to creating a plan and having the willpower to execute that plan,
Yes.
and understanding you're human, understanding you're not going to be perfect all the time, forgiving yourself. So I'd love to just get your thoughts around kind of the woo woo part of all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say I kind of touched on this earlier. And again, this is just what I did, and there may be different methods for everybody, but I love knowledge. So I am like a sponge. I absorb a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
read a lot, whether it's actual content online or physical books, things like that. And when you're taking in that much knowledge and you're trying to change your mindset about anything, whether it's health or money, that is critical. I don't know. I mean, maybe you just have this great willpower, but I think when people try to make a change, changing their money or their health or whatever, spirituality, whatever, you have to put yourself in the right environment. Like we said
Mm-hmm.
earlier, people don't like talking about money, just
Mm-hmm.
most of the time. But as I found when I was sharing things online, I'm not saying that you have to do this. Some people aren't comfortable. There are a lot of, I'll say women, it's mostly women that come to me via DMs or, texting me, and they have watched my story over the last year and a half. And they're like, I just want you to know that I paid off my credit card. Or I had one woman tell me that she paid off $38,000 in credit
Mm-hmm.
card debt. And
Yes.
my story had helped her. So when you talk about mindset shift, it's finding those people. And we have the internet, social media. You can find literally a community for everything, even really
Mm-hmm.
obscure things. There's a whole community out there with financial influencers, and there's people that fit your, I guess you could say, profile. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm unmarried. I don't have kids. But you may need to see somebody who is married with 4 kids and they paid off debt. And I do host Instagram lives where I interview Black women, typically younger Black women, who all have different stories and who have, a lot of them, paid off debt, and they all have different profiles. Some of them are married, no kids, some of them are single. And I say that because sometimes, and I thought this too, many of us are socialized to believe that being married will sometimes provide better financial security, which it does in many cases. But here, there's pros and cons to a money journey if you're married versus single. So some
Mm-hmm.
people might look and say, oh, of course they were able to do that because they have double income because they're married. The issue,
Mm-hmm.
though, that can come up when you're married or partnered with somebody is you're married or partnered with somebody. So that means that you have two different people who
Mm-hmm.
you all can be very, very compatible. It's not about really compatibility. You just have different opinions. So when you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about money, I know a lot of people do like budget dates and they set that on the calendar and it's once a month or however often they want to do it. And they say, well, what are your goals? How are the finances looking? So when you're married or partnered with somebody, one of the issues could be that you have to come on the same page. When you're single, yes, you may have less income based on what you're doing in your life, but you don't have to necessarily check in with anybody. If you want
Mm-hmm.
to go and pay off all of your debt, you don't have to consider as many people as you would if you were married or in a partnership. I say that, and that all goes into mentality shift because I really thought for a long time. I had another boss. He told me this 2 years ago. He's like, you really should be maxing out your contributions for retirement. And I still had debt at the time. And I'm like, what? That's easy for him to say. He's married.
Right.
And he's also high up in the organization that I work in. And I'm like, okay. And I know he's rich, but he was really he really liked talking about finances and trying to tell people around him who would listen, this is what you should do. Here are some tips. And when I contributed the max a couple weeks ago for my TSP, I said that in the status and commenting on it, it was like, I didn't think that I could do this a few years back, I know it sounded nice and that quote unquote, it would be something that I should quote unquote do, but I really didn't think I was able to do it with my circumstances at the time. And I'm still single and I was able to do it. So again, like when you get yourself around people or you take in information, like I just told you, the tips that I'm hearing from my job or people online, that all goes into it. And I would say this is my third round I'm about to start for my accountability groups. And I keep the groups small because that, I think, when you're talking about something sensitive like money, that doesn't make people feel like their whole life is on display in front of all of these people. I think it's a good number because it helps maintain the comfort level. But just knowing that we have a monthly check-in and that we have a group chat where we're sharing tips and blog posts or articles or podcasts, that keeps you on track, along with whatever. It could be a visual system, like I mentioned, with the goal box or an Excel spreadsheet. All of those tools are important to keep your mind primed so that you can continue on this wealth journey.
I got to wrap up soon. Oh my goodness, but this is so gold, people. And I hope you guys are listening to it because the time is now. Do not procrastinate because there are some things that I wish I would have done in my 20s, which would have made me a lot more, and I'm going to say wealthier, even though I'm not considered wealthy. If I would have gotten that condo that I was afraid to get in my 20s right now in DC and right outside of DC, I try not to look at how much it's worth now. You know what I'm saying? I try not to look at it because I was scared. I was scared at the time that I couldn't afford it. But looking back, I could afford it. I was fearful. But I could have sold it years later and gotten a sizable amount that I could have invested and did all this. But that's okay. That's okay. So yes, start now, people. Don't procrastinate. Don't be afraid. And I also just wanted to say too, with dual income, I would get annoyed sometimes, and I'm sure they're listening now. Some of my friends would be like, oh, you don't understand because you have a dual income at the time that I was married. But I was always tell them like, no. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a dual income or not. It goes back to discipline and mindset. Because even when I got my first condo, I was single and I was working 2-3 jobs to pay off my debt to a point that would allow me to qualify for a loan. Later in my journey, I ended up getting debt free, but it was that mentality to do better and start taking risks financially that got me there. Not having a dual income, that didn't do it for me because there's a ton of dual income people that are living paycheck to paycheck. You know what I'm saying? So I thank you for bringing that up. But before I get into the wrap up questions, I'm like, do we even dive into, I had some notes here that we might talk about homeownership, life insurance, importance of generational wealth.
Yes, that's a lot. I mean, like, that's a whole.
I know.
That's another podcast episode.
I know.
What I will say, so for home ownership, the quick thing, because I know we have to wrap up, is I really try to advocate for home ownership. I know there are folks out here that are like, when they could really be throwing that money in the stock market. Yes, but if you look at stats, the majority of, I will say, the cornerstone of wealth in this country is, I believe, home ownership. If you look at stats, and I think, and this is important for Black folks especially, and I don't even have time to go into history, but we all know the history. But there are some very specific things, and policy matters. I know we've talked a lot about personal finance and what we can do, but policy has been what has kept the racial wealth disparities in this country the way it is. So I think the home ownership rate for Black Americans right now hovers somewhere between, I want to say 42 and 46%, which is less than, 50% obviously, which means that the majority of Black people in this country do not own their home or own real estate. For the white population in this country, it's around 75%. This matters because when you own a home, you have options. When you own things, I'll say in general, you have options. What a lot of people are doing, yes, people have college funds, but when you own a home and you have equity in the home, you're able to take that equity out. What some people do is they take that equity out, some of it, and they send their kids to college. So what does
Mm.
that do? That allows their child to go to college debt free on their end. So then when they make their salaries, they're able to not be bogged down with debt, which is what we've been spending a lot of this podcast episode talking about. So it's all connected. As far as life insurance, that is very important. I don't even have time to go into this, but if you don't have life insurance, you need to get it. I know
Mhm.
some of us, it's okay, we're young and whatever. We've seen in the news, and I'm sure with COVID, people, you can die young. You can die young. And so it's important to have life insurance. You need to have it. And in our community, that's a big thing. Sometimes you see GoFundMe things when people pass or they die, and it's very, very, very important. The third thing you said, I forget, what was the third
Oh,
thing
generational
after
wealth.
life insurance? Yes, generational wealth. And so, like I said, I mentioned, and I don't have children right now, but the fact that I've paid off this debt, like I said, I'm able to do more with my money. So I've already started thinking about like college funds and stuff like that, and passing this house that I live in right now down because I plan to have this house paid off in 5 years. That's my
Mhm.
long-term financial goal for right now. So owning it free and clear, and again, that gives you options. But a lot of us, because of different factors, different reasons, it could be debt, it could be financial education or lack of financial education. Once we get to a certain age, and then to be real, when you're older, a lot of us, we get health issues where our money has to then be put there. So I think it's important to think about passing things down. You do not have to be a billionaire or even a millionaire to leave something to your children or whoever. It could be nieces, nephews, or children in the community or people that come after you. So just think about, like I said before, think more futuristically about your money, and like the paying off debt isn't just about like you. It's about, okay, well, this may give me options down the road later. If I decide to have kids, I'll have
Mhm.
more money to put into. You can start Roth IRAs for your children. You can start accounts for your children. But it's hard to do that if you are bound by debt and owing other people. So that's what I would
Mhm.
say about generational wealth and its importance.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to the generational wealth. As a woman who has, chosen not to have children, like since I was probably in high school, I told folks that I didn't want to have kids, and no one ever believed me because of society, and they think all women want to have
Mm-hmm.
babies. Which is like, no, we all have choices. But so for me, I knew that. And so if you fall in the camp where you don't have children, for me, my nieces, and I have 5 of them, I am looking for ways in order to set them up in the future, which then if
Mm-hmm.
they choose to have families or support other family members, then that generational wealth then builds off of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even I talk about my financial journey, even to all of
Mm-hmm.
them, and the oldest is 16, because I want them to be comfortable even hearing about money, talking about money, understanding savings. And so when I pass, or even before that, and I give them money maybe to help them in college, to help them do programs, to maybe help them with a down payment
Mm-hmm.
on their house, then they're going to be smart with it, right? And they're going to do
Yes.
things with it, and they're going to know how to double, triple, quadruple their money. So I think if you have children or just family members, it's just in general, just as a community, we just need to make sure that we are better at making choices that help build that generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what you said is important. Like they're gonna watch you or watch us and pick
Mm-hmm.
up on those behaviors. And it's also what you touched on is not only just passing down the assets, but passing down the knowledge so that they won't screw up the assets. Because we've seen that too, where people inherit things and then they squander it because it's inheritance and they don't know, they don't have the discipline or the financial knowledge or education to sustain it.
Yeah. And I always tell my nieces too, I'm like, hey, y'all better take care of me if you want to end up in my will. Seriously.
There are people have rules attached to how that money is given to us. So,
Hey.
how the money, You get it if you do X, Y, and Z. You don't get it if you don't do X, Y, and Z.
You're going to be set. Make sure I
Yes.
don't end up in no bogus nursing home. Like, y'all better take care of me. You know? And I feel like I at least want, before I get into my productivity question, want you at least to let people know about your accountability group. I don't know if there are still openings or anything like that, but let me know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, just in case somebody's like, I need that.
Yeah, so by the time this podcast airs, they will probably be closed. So what I do is, as far as applications, taking in applications. So I told you the one I did for about a year, and that came out of the vision board party. And that was probably, I would say, my pilot. And then I just saw that as I was sharing my journey, it was something that I think people were interested in. So I launched the first one it may have been July to December of this year. So we're just wrapping up for this first official one. And then I put a call out for the next one, which is January to June. Do 6 months because I find that it's a shorter time period and people can commit, I think, better. If that makes sense when it's shorter. There will be another call out for those in the upcoming months. But I think by the time this podcast, airs, they will be closed. But what we do in those, like I mentioned before, it's about a group, no more than 5 people, and there's different accountability groups based on the topic. So there's one on debt payoff. I had one on mortgage payoff because there were a few people interested in attacking the mortgage on their home and contributing more to the principal. So we did one on that. There was a savings one, but I found that the interest was lagging on that one. What I'm doing now is I took inventory of what people would be interested in. So I think a lot of people want to do a general group where we talk about different things. One month we may talk about estate planning, another month we may talk about sinking funds and stuff like that. The accountability groups, we have it's a 1-hour session once a month, and we talk about our progress. Again, I'm not giving specific financial advice because I can't. I am not a certified financial planner, advisor. So we just keep each other on the right track. And we also, between sessions, will use group chats to just see how people are doing or share something that we've learned. So very, very easy concept. And there's more information about that on my Instagram, which I can share in a little bit.
Perfect. And then is this fee-based? So you pay like a monthly fee for the membership?
So right now it is not. It is free $99.
Oh.
It's free $99 for right now. Yes, it's free $99. So like I said, it's out there. So I do advertise for it. So people get in while it's free. Hint, hint. I do have some things that I charge for one-on-one sessions around goal setting, things like that. So because everybody's life is different. So that information is also included at my Instagram profile.
And folks listening, you guys are going to roll your eyes at what I am about to tell Latasha. But even if it is a low number, I feel like you should be charging for it. Only because, I'll just say a couple things. One, people tend to be more invested when they're actually paying for something. And two, it's your time. An hour a month, people yes. So, and then 3, because some people are like going to roll their eyes. I could feel you guys rolling your eyes right now because you're like, well, if I'm trying to get out of debt, why are you charging me a fee? But the thing about it, if you do what you're supposed to do, it pays itself off. You know, like
this is true. It's true.
It's all about investing in yourself, right? So
yeah.
It's worth it because you're doing it. You're holding yourself accountable because it's a fee. You're going to really hold yourself accountable, and the amount of money that you're going to save will be pennies compared to what a monthly fee would be. So just throwing it out there, Latasha.
And thank you. I had a few people say you should be charging, and
you're doing the research for this.
See how it is, and Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was like, you're doing the research for it, planning the sessions.
Yeah,
People don't realize, but that is a lot of work, like doing
it is.
research and preparing content for things like that. A lot of planning goes into making things like that meaningful, tracking things that are people are saying, so then you can remember to like remind them. Like it takes work. It's more than that 1 hour. You've
Right.
spent
There's
several
a lot of
hours
behind the scenes
preparing for
thing.
that
Yes.
hour. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
just throwing it out there. Okay. Wrap up questions. How do you stay organized? Any tools, software, or techniques you'd like to share?
So my thing for staying organized is writing everything down.
Mm.
Like I said earlier, I use notes in my iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
I use post-it notes, random lists around my house, and even things like errands, like Christmas shopping, like what I need to do. It's written down on paper because I have to see it. Like
Mm.
it just, and I also like the satisfaction of crossing something out. That's just my personality. So it looks like not looks like I'm being productive and accomplishing tasks. So that's what I would say. That is my main thing. Even in my 9 to 5, I keep a list, a running tab of things, priorities that I need to address.
And do you have a hobby?
I actually, there's a few, but I will focus on this one. So puzzles. And recently, and I guess these are Legos, but Legos, I don't know if you've seen them in the store at Target, one of my favorite stores, but it's like a mosaic. And I'm a big Beatles fan. And so it's this huge, and they're like these circular Lego pieces that make up the face of whatever Beatle you are deciding to work on at the time because it's 4 different puzzles. And I love puzzles. It's just a thing. I also, if you look at my website, latashannthomas.com, I am also an artist, a painter. And so I have some of my art featured there, although I haven't really dabbled in painting in a while. But I would say those two things, definitely, yes.
And it's weird on the news. I think it was on the news or something I read, maybe they were saying like one of the best investments are Legos. They hold their value in years down the road, especially like the smaller sets you could sell for lots of money.
I was in Target last weekend and they were on sale because of Christmas. The entire aisle was empty
Yeah.
except for 3 different sets. And they were gone. And it's anybody. It could be kids, it could be older people. I think on the actual thing it says ages like 5 to 99, literally on the side of the thing. So yeah, anybody can play with Legos. And it's good. You're building something. It's very peaceful. So I like them a lot.
Yeah, good for brain function too. Okay, and last but not least, where can the listeners find you? Your website, your social media accounts. Please let them know how they can learn more about Latasha.
Yes. So my Instagram account, which I've talked a lot about because that is where I share my financial journey, it is at Latasha_N as in Nancy _Thomas. So that is my Instagram account. If you guys want to follow me, I provide tips and just progress on my financial journey. And I also share information from other financial influencers as I see fit. So that's one place. And then my website is latashannthomas.com that I mentioned earlier. So that has other stuff beyond my financial journey, more stuff about me. But I am thinking about launching a separate website just focused on the money aspect. So
Mm,
make sure you guys look out for that. So I will put that on my website and my Instagram account when that comes.
perfect. Well, thank you, Latasha. I really appreciate you sharing all the things.
Yes, and thanks so much for having me. I'm glad I was able to share it and on your platform, I've listened to other episodes, so I like what you're doing. Thanks so much.
Well, well, well. What did you guys think? I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. You guys know that I am really, really passionate about this topic. I just think it's so important. I think we should know our numbers. I think we should be taking action. I think we should continue to educate ourselves on it. And I'm really hoping that if you're hearing my voice right now, you are jazzed, that you are taking notes, that you're going to come back to this episode and you're going to really figure out maybe how you can do some things that work for us. Like I said, we're not financial planners, and she said it too, but we're just sharing our story, and we hope that our stories help you. And if they do, I would love to hear about that. You can email me at hello@NacheSnow, or email Latasha or DM Latasha on Instagram. And I'm on Instagram too. So check us out. The show notes for this page is nachesnow.com/142. The book that she mentioned will be there. I'll drop a couple of books in there too that you should consider and think about as you continue your financial journey. Anywho, yeah, I mean, Merry Christmas for those of you guys who celebrate Christmas, and Happy New Year's and happy holidays in general, regardless of what you celebrate or don't celebrate. And as I said earlier in the episode, if you'd like me to do a solo episode and you want me to cover something specifically before the end of the year, please DM me at Nache Snow on Instagram, or send me an email, hello@nachesnow.com. Regardless, I have another episode already lined up for you in the new year, and I'm excited to bring you a lot more. Thank you, thank you, thank you for everything and making 2021 a great year, folks. Sharing is caring. Please share away. 5 stars on, you guys know the drill. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, thumbs up on YouTube, subscribe wherever you are. Yeah, thanks again. If this is the last time you're hearing my voice in 21, you have a wonderful, wonderful season, regardless of what happens. Make sure you take care of you. All right? Until next time, my friends.